Well, welcome team. Grant Hagen here with DroneDeploy, joined with Brooks and Zach today, and we are really excited to talk a little bit more about flight services. And there's no better person to help lead that conversation than Mr. Brooks here. And so, Brooks, would love for you to introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your role, and then Zach would love to hear a little bit more from you too.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Grant. So I'm Brooks. I've been at DroneDeploy for about 4 years, in the drone industry for about six. A lot of that time has spent working with drone service providers to dispatch large operations for big enterprise companies just like Turner. So one of the services, so people well know DroneDeploy is a software company, and that's our secret sauce and our bread and butter. But one of the things that we try to do to enable our customers is to dispatch flights for them. We call it flight services, so that when they have areas or if they don't have pilots themselves, we can go and still capture data that they can use our platform for.
It's awesome.
So we'll dive into that much more.
And Zach, tell us a little bit about your role, what you do at Turner, how long you've been there, and yeah, just some of your interactions with DroneDeploy so far.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Zach Eling here. Been with Turner Construction for 7 years, working as a VDC Manager for our Denver business unit, employing everything from what you'd expect with BIM coordination, but a big and growing piece of our operations and business has been reality capture. So that's where drones come into the picture. I would say they've been a thing at Turner for maybe 5 to 6 years, but within the past 2 to 3 years, that specific piece of our business has grown exponentially. And at this point, a lot of our project teams are using it, drone technology, pretty successfully.
That's awesome. I will turn the floor over to you, Brooks, and would just love for you to kind of dive into a little bit more of the specifics between your team and working with Turner. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and change it over here for you guys to kind of continue the conversation.
The topic of the conversation today is going to be around flight services and the value of that for Turner. But before we get into that, just for some of the audience here, I wanted to kind of dissect your role within Turner and kind of the value of drones so that people understand like the why behind what you're doing first. So I guess could you take us one level deeper into your role on a day-to-day basis or even a weekly or monthly basis? Like what are some of your responsibilities?
Sure. Yeah. So as a VDC manager, the primary role is ensuring that we as Turner, specifically at our Denver business unit, are keeping up to date with the latest tools and technologies as it relates to construction, and then making sure that those tools, whether it's drones or other tools as well, related to BIM coordination, et cetera, are being passed on to our project teams, that the staff that we have on the VDC department understand how to use those tools, implement them correctly. And so, yeah, drones come into that because they're something that our project teams are seeing and requesting more and more. We're seeing that as a value add within the technology space to our projects, especially in the sense of data-based decision making. So yeah, my role is essentially guiding our folks, the boots on the ground, to these tools, making sure they understand the cost, the safety implications, what it takes to implement them, and then getting them set up for success. Because at the end of the day, I'm not the one who's most important in using this data. I'm just the person who gets it to the right people.
Yeah, thanks for that. And also to be clear, like we have the name DroneDeploy, but obviously you guys aren't just using drones, you're using a bunch of other, and that's part of your role is to look at all the sorts of sensors and technologies out there that can be used to do those same things as well, right?
Right. I mean, I would say reality capture as a broader space is something that we've been heavily invested in of late. I think if you're not invested in that space, you're missing out. So yeah, that is inclusive of drones, but it also includes 360 photography. Laser scanning is also a huge component of our work these days. So yeah, again, I think the ability to drive data-based decision making and having the latest and greatest information on your project, without those type of reality capture tools, I think you're going to be at a loss.
Cool. Um, awesome. Thanks, Zach. I wanted to go into now the value of drones at Turner. So can you talk a little bit about some of the use cases that you guys are using drones specifically for, or any reality capture technology? Like, what are the things that are really useful as a business for Turner?
Sure. Yeah, I think there are probably two primary user groups that have a heavy interest in drone technology, at least within our Denver business unit. I think business development, then I think of our operations teams, right? So just our construction sites, our superintendents, our project managers. From a business development standpoint, you can get some interesting information about the project site that, frankly, sometimes I think even the architect and engineers may not have. If they're operating with a Google Maps view as a background, and maybe that's 2 or 3 years old. Of
Hmm.
course, they're always going to design the full site, but I think understanding just what's happening with your neighbors, what's across the street, all of that stuff has an impact in how you think about the job site. And then I think even more importantly, for our operations teams, these are the folks that fly on a reoccurring basis. They're generating a lot of data. Uh, they use the maps, they use the videos to get a perspective on the job site that previously just did not exist, right? Of course, I'll go back to Google Maps. We have some of that data that you can pull off the internet, but the accuracy of that is always in question because things are, changing all the time. And so
Yep.
I think our biggest group and our group that gets the most value out of this data are our field teams. Superintendents are using it for coordination meetings. They're overlaying logistics onto it. They're pulling the data, in for analysis as well. So I try to get our superintendents set up, make sure they understand the interface. Then I step back, and all the creative uses that we see typically come out of our field teams.
Got it. Yeah, I think if I were to try and summarize that answer, it's largely around documenting site progress, and capturing things from different perspectives, so people are able to make decisions on projects, measure things. Like, there's all these different, like, tangents that folks can go down that are useful for their individual jobs. So maybe it's hard to boil it down to one specific thing every time, but having that data every time is always going to be useful for those roles.
Correct. Yeah, I think there's both the record keeping that you get, and so that provides a history, a basis for, hey, where did we precisely dig that utility because for whatever reason we're not able to find it properly in a locate. So I think you can look back, but you can also look forward, and the looking forward is coordination meetings, talking about logistics, um, using that on a week-to-week basis.
Yep. I'd like to dig into, if we can, I think you mentioned earlier that Turner's been using drones or drone technology for roughly 6 years, but we've started to work really well together, probably for the past 2 or 3. So what sort of changed? Like, maybe talk a little bit about the origin of using drone technology at Turner and kind of what's changed over the past couple of years to see the sort of volume increase that we've seen in terms of drone flights and other things.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, and I don't want to speak for the whole country, but I think within the central region, my
Hmm.
perception is that maybe you go back 5 or 6 years, and some of our larger projects with just more consistent clients provided the opportunity to fly drones. Um, and I think what really changed, because Turner does have a pretty strict drone policy within our environmental health and safety policy, and
Hmm.
so there was somewhat of a barrier to entry into using drones, and that policy still exists. But I think if I were to look back 5 or 6 years, if I, as a individual in a business unit who didn't have an extreme amount of bandwidth to implement drones, navigating that policy by myself was always difficult. And I did personally face challenges in getting drones up and running on our projects. And I think what's really changed and made it more uh, just common on our projects is the fact that it's easier to make happen. So the understanding of that safety policy that happens on a national level, expectations about quality that Turner has that happen on a larger level, those things getting cemented and then being able to get distributed to each of our different business units has made it much, much easier to request a drone. So if I can request a drone and it takes maybe a meeting with the project manager and then an hour, 2 hours of request time and safety protocol boxes being checked, I'm going to do that because I know the value add is there. But if I have to grind my way through these corporate decisions, not knowing who to talk to, etc., for days and days, at least at Turner, that was a huge barrier to entry, and it's allowed us to make it easy and automatic.
Yeah. So if I can sort of bring up a leading question, if I may, is just the point about being able to request a drone. Like, can you explain for maybe those that aren't familiar with requesting a drone flight? Because as I understand it, it's against the Turner policy for Turner employees to actually fly drones themselves, which is like kind of where things originated. And then, this requesting process is one of those new things. Can you talk about that and what specifically that is in working with DroneDeploy?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think there is, we'll call it the partnership aspect of it, and the fact that we've been able to build a partnership with DroneDeploy, understand each other's needs, what contractually does Turner necessitate, what safety wise does Turner necessitate, having a partner that is on board for that. So that's component one. And then as far as the data on demand piece, I mean, I think it's just a very simple tool to use. And I think, all the best tools are relatively simple to use. And the fact that I can jump on data on demand, I can Google an address, I can draw a polygon around a site and press go. Obviously, some steps happen on the back end. Pilots need to get contacted, etc. But I think the interface for requesting does make just that overall process much simpler.
Zach, if I can, I'd like to just go in really quick, and maybe you can talk through the process of actually ordering a flight, just because hopefully, as you've described, it's very simple and easy for other people to do. So just to kind of set the stage here, this is one of your projects, and you've already typed in that address, like you mentioned, into our platform and gone through and planned out. It looks like several different flight plans in here. So can you kind of describe what you do to actually request this flight, just to kind of show folks out there how easy it actually is?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, log into DroneDeploy, create a new project. Step one, input the address. That's going to pull you into the location for that project in reference to a Google Earth background. So you do get the surrounding context. So that image there does show content, both which has been captured and not been captured by drone flight. And then on the left-hand side, once you're in the fly request screen, there are multiple different flight options. The map flight, I think, is sort of your core flight that's capturing basically vertically top-down imagery of the site in a gridded pattern that gets assembled into an ortho mosaic and a mesh thereafter. So I think every project probably needs to have that, but there are certainly special cases as well where you may just need a video, you may just need a photograph. So those options are also available in here. I know our teams really use the panoramic photographs quite a bit, so much
Yes,
greater
you do.
than. Yeah, and they're great, right? I mean, I think you're getting 100 photographs in one, and then again, requesting a video, pretty simple. And I think now that I have a pretty good feeling for the tool, that it'd take me 30 to 45 minutes and I could have a new project set up.
Cool. And then just to kind of share here with folks, this is all you do. There's a button here on the left-hand side. Zach can go in and just hit request. It's very simple. If he needs pilot to check in with Bob, the site super, and then provide Bob's phone number and make that required. We can do all that here. Zach gets some nice information, so we know that he has 9 different flight plans that he's made, and we get his estimate of how long that should take to actually capture on there. Anything to add, Zach, or is that good?
Yeah, I mean, I think just one other nice piece of information it provides is an estimate on how long each flight is going to take. So I think anyone looking to just proactively manage their budget is going to have an understanding of a certain duration of flight is going to have a certain cost. And so by seeing each flight that I request, each individual subflight, seeing the time duration of that, I can accurately budget accordingly.
Awesome. And if I can ask another question just about the process here in working with DroneDeploy, and this question could either backfire on me or be shameless self-promotion, but how has it been working with the DroneDeploy team to sort of manage the logistics and organize these flights? Because I could just say from experience, it does take a lot of work to often set these things up. So can you talk a little bit about like how working with the services team or working with DroneDeploy to actually capture these things goes?
Yeah, I mean, I would say overall a very positive experience, right? Once I literally click the button request, I'm fully aware that there are conversations happening on the back end. I know that DroneDeploy works with third-party service providers to get the right people to the site. So it's nice that I don't have to be in the nitty-gritty with any of those conversations. I think DroneDeploy is actively engaged in communicating to me. If we have to shift a day or someone is not available in the morning, but they may be in the afternoon. Those type of things, I think it happens pretty seamlessly, and actually getting someone to a job site has never been much of a challenge.
Awesome. Thank you for the nice words. Outside of just the operations and logistics of getting these flights set up, back to inevitably you want the data that's provided to add business value to Turner and be useful to the company and the team. So I was hoping you could talk us through. I think you've shared with us an example of sort of the financial impact of how you guys evaluate whether things have been successful, and what some of the value that drone data has provided there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think again, with any construction project, there are moments in which things aren't always transparent or clear between different parties. Disputes are a thing. Quality issues arise, and without some sort of data to back the argument that you're making or the point that you believe in, it's really just a finger pointing game, or that's what it can become, unless we're driving into something that's substantive and we can point to it and have trust in. And so this is just an example. We had a large job site, and along the edge of our building, there were questions about just the cut fill happening on the project. I think between one point and another, we ended up landing in a range from about 18 to 22 inches high from where we wanted to be. The total land area was definitely in the acres, right? So maybe 3 to 4 acres. And so the larger impact was relatively significant. I think to cut that much dirt, I can't do the calculation on the top of my head, but the total cubic yards I think is relatively significant. And I can only assume that the amount of dollars that would cost would be in the tens of thousands. And so we had this situation arise. We used the historical data that we had within DroneDeploy. Fortunately, on this project, and I would say a best practice for any project, we had set up survey control, and we had shot targets at the beginning of the project, so we knew our exact elevation for every flight. But then we used this data to analyze 4 different data points during the project. We ended up using the line tool within DroneDeploy and then exporting that to Excel to understand just the overall elevation. and what we suspected was ultimately confirmed, which is great, right? I mean, I think if we had gone to our trade partner and said, hey, we feel like, you had created extra fill on the project by this amount, um, without something to substantiate that, it's kind of our word against theirs. So this was a great tool to have that conversation professionally and with data rather than opinions as the backer.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's really cool to see kind of these graphs here. I'm hoping maybe we can go just another layer deeper on that. But I totally agree. It's like the site documentation that you mentioned earlier is, we know that that's valuable, but this is one of the true ways of measuring value, I believe, with using reality capture or drone technology, is once you start to get into the measurements, and actually verifying disputes and all these other things, that's where the true value sort of speaks for itself. So I don't know if there's anything to say about, you have these graphs here. Is there anything specific to mention, or kind of help us understand them a little bit?
Sure. So, we were looking for the best way to analyze a specific portion of the site. If you go back up to the image, you'll see there are 6 different lines that we created, kind of a pattern, L-shaped pattern there on site. So 3 lines going from left to right, and then 4 lines going back from the top to the bottom of the screen. And so that's the area we knew we wanted to analyze. The exact location of any one of those lines was not as important as understanding, I would say, the overall elevation trend. We had thought about just doing a topographic export, but I think we moved towards this, and I think both are great options, but we moved towards this just because it broke down the data in a single line at the end of the day in that Excel export. So we used these 6 lines, broke them out on the subsequent sheet here. Each shows sort of a trend in elevation, and we looked for macro trends, right? At the end of the day, I wasn't concerned about whether or not, this went up or down by 2 inches, even 6 inches. I don't think we would have been great enough to raise concern. We were looking for really over 1 foot of difference and a disparity that jumped out at us. And again, that's why I think I went with the somewhat simpler line graph versus the topography, which is great, but it just shows a somewhat higher level of detail, I would say.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I want to kind of share for the audience as well, like how would you have done this if there wasn't DroneDeploy or drone technology to do this? What's sort of the legacy way of performing these same calculations, and how is that different from this method?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably 2 components to my answer here. The first is, I think logically we would survey the data, right? So we might shoot stakes throughout the site, and in shooting enough stakes, shooting a grid, we'll get an understanding of whether or not we've brought the site to maybe its final state. Hey, this is right about where we're going to be paving the roads. Earthwork contractor provides that data to the general contractor, and that kind of walks away at that point. But depending on whether or not you're at a point in the project where you're going to be delivering that final information, the fact of the matter is you may just not have the data at all. It just probably isn't being captured.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway is you don't know what you don't have.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for that. I was going to jump back, actually, mostly just because I thought of this question as we were talking. But on the data on demand ordering, or just the process of working with DroneDeploy on that, is there any advice that you would share for someone who is new, who is just getting into, they're ordering maybe their first flight from the Turner program or from any other program? Is there any advice or tips that you might suggest for someone ordering a flight?
Sure. I mean, I do think it is pretty straightforward. So if somebody is relatively tech proficient, I don't think they'll run into any issues in terms of the actual user interface. And being able to understand it. I would just encourage people to think about the full suite of possible flight options, because it may not be immediately obvious that one flight type versus another is going to provide value. One I think of, which is relatively new to Turner, is like the facade inspection tool. So it operates a little bit differently than the maps or than the panoramics, which are primarily focused top down. It looks forward at the facade of a building. So I think just having an awareness, maybe even just running through those different tools on the left-hand side, should be helpful and provide you the context of what's out there.
Awesome. I would also say to that, it's kind of like understand what capabilities are out there, or if you're not sure, maybe I'd suggest ask someone either internally or even on the drone deploy side. I think that's one of the, if I may toot our own horn a little bit, we have a lot of great support articles and customer success folks and a whole army of people who are willing to provide suggestions. If you're not sure what you're doing when you're planning out those flights, because sometimes it is hard if you haven't done it yourself already. So one other question just about the process, if I may too, was there anything that sort of surprised you throughout the process, either on any sort of note, just as an end user?
Sure. I think the general ease of the process, just kind of circling back to that, I had my expectations of the process being fairly difficult because that was what I was experiencing previously in my work engaging with drones, and it exceeded my expectations, we'll say, and just how simple it was to implement. And with that in mind, I think once we were able to get it off the ground, the appetite that our project teams had for it, that was a big thing as well, right? We went from using 0 drones in the Denver Turner business unit to having it be a standard in a pretty short period of time. I know adoption for tools can take a little bit of time, and I thought this was surprisingly quick.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think on that, just for context and scale there, the numbers are pretty impressive for Turner overall too. You guys are you'll probably do close to 1,000 flights this year, I believe, without a single drone of your own, which is pretty cool. So that kind of leads actually nicely into the final question here, which is, what would, in your mind, Turner's drone program look like if there weren't flight services through DroneDeploy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would come back to the reality that each individual VDC manager or business unit would have to wade through this process on their own. And I think at the end of the day, we want to get to using data. I want to get this information into my project team's hands, and I want to maximize my time. So we're not drone operations specialists. We don't need to be. We're builders, and we want information to become better builders. So I think if we had to wade through it, I think it would take up some individuals' time to implement, and I think there would be we'll just say inconsistency across the country as well in how it's being implemented.
Zach, really appreciate your time. I know this is a really fun topic to talk about because I think you've hit on it a couple times. It's just speed to use, high efficiency, high value. Oftentimes in construction technology, you don't get all of those three in the same sentence. And I think what's really fun in sharing these stories is that not only are you guys seeing that within Turner specifically, but you're seeing it at scale. And that's something that we really try to focus on at DroneDeploy, is not just coming up with a simple point solution, but how do we come up with a scalable solution? And so, yeah, really appreciate your time. Brooks, always fun to have you hop on here to walk through what this process looks like and how Turner has really had hockey stick growth over this last couple of years. And that's a testament to the two of your guys' hard work, the partnership that you have, the trust that's been built. And so we really appreciate the time, Zach and Brooks. And so thank you guys for joining on with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grant.